Police cuts will risk British lives at time of terror threat, Jeremy Corbyn warns government. The Labour leader's comments will add to pressure on George Osborne from across the political spectrum as force chiefs flag up their weakness against terrorism. Cuts to police funding would be gambling with the safety of the British people, Jeremy Corbyn will say. His warning comes as ministers are locked in talks over the Home Office budget days before George Osborne reveals his spending review. Mr Corbyn is adding his voice to calls for the Chancellor not to plunder the policing part. The Labour leader will say, by pressing ahead with these cuts, the government is failing in its most basic duty to protect our citizens. The planned cuts pose a direct threat to the security of our own people. Mr Corbyn will tell his party's South West Conference in Bristol, they must be halted. That means no reduction in numbers, essential equipment or helicopter support. Senior police have warned Home Secretary Theresa May more cuts will severely impair ability to deal with a Paris-style terror attack, saying forces have already lost 40,000 officers. Home Affairs Committee Chairman Keith Faz said now was simply the wrong time to risk the effectiveness of policing in Britain. London Mayor Boris Johnson met the Prime Minister one-to-one this week to warn that Treasury demands to slash thousands of officers risks going too far. And Surrey Crime Commissioner Kevin Hurley said weapons were below standard. Paris police used military grenade launchers to take down those terrorists. We are nowhere near that capable, even in London. Mr Hurley, former head of counter-terrorism for the City of London Police, also claimed weapons used by armed response units is below the standard needed to take on people with AK-47 seconds. Last night it emerged the United Nations Security Council is poised to back all necessary measures to tackle ISIS. Diplomats said a deal was likely on a French resolution that called on member states to redouble efforts to suppress terrorist acts. In his speech, Mr Corbyn will again signal his opposition to airstrikes. He will demand a different kind of foreign policy, based on a new and more independent relationship with the rest of the world, a relationship where war is a last resort. The Labour chief is expected to say, for the past 14 years, Britain has been at the centre of a succession of disastrous wars that have brought devastation to large parts of the wider Middle East. They have increased, not diminished, the threat to our own national security in the process. Earlier, former Labour Home Secretary Lord Reid delivered a scathing attack on the party's response to the terrorist threat. He told the BBC, "It doesn't look coherent if, when the leader says something, a shadow cabinet person and a series of them come out, disagree, contradict, clarify or say he wasn't saying what he was saying. We need a competent opposition." His comments came as one-time leadership hopeful Chuck Umunna hit out at trolls who target party moderates who disagree with Mr Corbyn. "The reality is on some issues you agree that you cannot always agree," said Mr Umunna. "That is why I think it is absolutely fundamental that we have a free vote when that comes." It follows a stormy week for the Labour leader who is accused of sending confused messages about his view over a shoot-to-kill policy for terrorists threatening civilians. His questioning of the legal basis of the drone strike which killed ISIS executioner Jihadi John was blasted by opponents and some Labour MPs. And the rift with his backbenchers and some shadow ministers deepened when he appeared to rule out a free vote over widening RAF strikes so tornado warplanes can attack ISIS targets in Syria. But Mr Corbyn is set to brush off Tory claims he isn't patriotic, insisting, Labour will take no lectures in patriotism from the Conservatives, the political wing of the hedge funds, the bankers and the 1% elite.